do you have any tips for anybody who wants to kind of expand their viewing of Formula One and their experience?
Yeah, so I would say read a lot because when I started personally, it was watching a race or watching qualifying or something, then going into straight into what are the pundits say, what are the people who know out of the window. Now you're trying to understand what does this mean. So then you're gonna go find out that it means they weren't in the right temperature. Why weren't they in the right temperature? Because the track was cold. So these little things you start picking up, and then the thing about Formula One is things happen over and over and over and over again. It's never like a new thing. And even if it's a new thing, someone must have picked it up some time ago. So you will notice that in the next 5 races, we'll have a tire problem again. And you already remember from the time you read about tire temperature, you already know,
Yeah.
oh, right, they're struggling with tires, you know?
So when you're watching a race, do you kind of just like watch the race, or do you have like the onboard? Do you have the telemetry? Like what's your kind of setup when you watch a race?
Right. So when I watch a race, I have obviously Twitter on. I have 3 screens. One is the actual race. Yeah. The actual race, Lewis is on board, and data.
And we know I thought Alonso the biggest troll on the grid. I swear he's just there to cause issues. Like he literally just likes to create create drama. He's
It's
like,
kind of
is
crazy
it
because
me?
also,
Am I the drama?
am
Like
I
that
the
is
drama? I don't think I'm the drama. Maybe I am. Yeah, no, that's his
that is
energy. But
Alonso
it's
every
so
week.
this
And
was
there was this one point during the race where his engineer's like calling him on the radio and being like, "Oh, which tires do you prefer? Would you like the hard tires or the medium tires?" And I was like, "Is this Starbucks? Why are you asking him what he prefers? Like, give him the
Fernando
tires that
soda.
he needs."
No.
Hi guys, welcome back to On the Chicane. You're here with me, Paris, and this week, not my co-host Mariam, as she is away celebrating her honeymoon. Congrats, Maz, we love you for that. Enjoying life. But we do have a very special guest that I am so thrilled that is joining us. So this is Deni, and she is better known as FIA Girly on Twitter. So, like, big round of applause. Thank you for coming. I feel like so many people know you, but maybe they haven't seen your face. This is probably one of the first times that you are on a kind of channel and actually showing your face, because it's almost like a persona, isn't it? Like FIA
Yeah.
Girly.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about yourself? How did you get into Formula One? What's your background?
First, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. We've been postponing this for so long, just waiting. I remember we first spoke like last year, was it? I was
Yeah.
like, I'm still comfortable. I don't want to do this now, and I'm so glad the time finally came. Well, I got into F1 just randomly in the summer, because I was kind of because I was always a sports person. I'm a sports person myself, so I used to swim and
Okay.
represent my country and all of that. And then obviously with being a sports person, you get into other sports. So football was kind of my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just so happened that I was kind of tired of watching the same thing over and over. And it wasn't a great season for Man United. It wasn't a great season for Barcelona, which are the teams I support.
Okay.
So I was like, let me get into something else. What is there? And I had a couple of friends that watched F1 actively. And so I was just interested in it again, in a sense. The last time I watched F1 was like when Vettel was champion, maybe back in 2013. So I didn't know anything about it, if I'm being honest. And so I just got into it because I wanted to watch something new. And it just so happened that F1 has so many layers to it. So I didn't just watch. I was like, okay, so why are they changing the tires and why are they doing this and what are these upgrades people are talking about? And so I got into the engineer side of things. And then
Did you
after
have
that,
a friend that was kind of explaining this to you as you were kind of having these questions coming up?
yeah, so I had one friend actually that helped me with basic things like point system, tires, pit stops, like the basic you can know to watch a race and understand it. But
Yeah.
I didn't have any friend or didn't have any friend that actually understood tech like I do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's safe to say, out of all my friends, after starting watching it through them, now I know more than most of them. Because
Okay, I
after
think that's
that, I
fair to
just went,
say. That's fair to
yeah,
say.
yeah. Because after that, I just went in and I was like, well, I need to know more, and I'm so interested, I'm so invested in this. And it got to a point where they were like, all you do is talk about F1. And I was like, okay, I have to leave this
Yeah.
environment and place myself in an environment where people want to hear about Formula One. And that's
Okay.
how FIA Girly came about, because I was like, you know what, why not join F1 Twitter? And then yeah, after that, the rest is like history.
So it's been a few years then, I'm guessing, that you've watched Formula One, and then FIA Girly kind of came about in the last year or so. Maybe like 2021 season or 2020 season.
Yeah, FIA Girly only came to life last year, June 2021.
Okay. But you're
Right.
quite successful on Formula One Twitter. I feel like you're one of the accounts that we kind of look to for information. You know, if there's new articles coming out, like I know you read a lot of the German Autosport magazine. If there's telemetry that we haven't seen, you'd be posting it, and just conversations that are happening around the paddock, not just what's happening on the grid. So as you said, like you've got a wide-ranging interest when it comes to Formula One, but was there an aim in particular with FIA Girly? Like, what led you more to kind of tweet about those kind of things?
So when joining F1 Twitter it was always my love for F1 tech was already there. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was never like, oh, I just want to join to meet people. And if that makes sense, it was
Yeah.
more of I want to learn more. And the environment that I'm in right now has like a ceiling, like I can't go past this. So I followed people on my personal account. I already followed people like Bryson and some other friends that I have today, like racing telemetry and certain people that introduced me to that world.
Mm-hmm.
But it became hard to consolidate kind of like my normal life as me and being in that space,
Yeah.
especially because I like the pressure for myself. And so I went into creating an account specifically for that. And I didn't even want people to know. So my friends didn't know about the account, anything. I just wanted to speak about Formula One in a safe environment.
You were pretty
But it was
anonymous. Like,
always,
I feel like the face reveal only came this year, if anything.
yeah, yeah. I was very much loyal. I even got called a catfish at some point because I just wouldn't use any of my pictures or any of that. But it wasn't like when I want to be a person on F1 Twitter. It's just like I just want to learn.
Mm.
And the account picking up like followers and numbers and things like that just all came very randomly.
Yeah.
So my aim was always just create a safe space where I can talk about tech, where people want to know about tires, when people want to teach me about engines and all of these components and things, because people don't really talk about it in the
Mm.
environments that I'm in, at least in like real life, we can say
Yeah.
that. Friends is just more like, oh, he passed Hamilton, or he did this, da, 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 oh,
Yeah.
Hamilton crashed, da, da, da. They don't want to go into the nitty gritty. And so the creating the Twitter account was for that. And it just so happened that it became something huge, because the more I learned, the more I shared with people, and
Yeah.
people started becoming relying on things that I used to say, and then it just so turned into what it is today.
Like I said, I think you are definitely one of those accounts that people look to for information. So I think you definitely succeeded with that. But being Twitter and being kind of like a soapbox for a lot of people, do you find that you've had ups and downs? Like, what are some of maybe the pitfalls of being on social media as like a known account, you know?
Yeah, it's hard. I'm not gonna lie, it really is hard. One thing that I've realized, and I think a lot of people can attest to this, is from the pandemic to now, people have become very, very judgmental. We spent a lot of time behind computer screens for like almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Computer screens, phones, and all of that. And everyone, I feel like people lost sense of identity if you weren't able to go outside. You kind of build yourself over whatever you have on your phone, whether it's your Instagram, whether it's your Twitter account, and whatever you manage to pick up. And so with that came this sense of we're not humans anymore,
Mm.
because you're essentially just on your phone all the time, and you end up becoming whatever profile it is that you create. And with that, I think people on the internet just are able to be vile however they please, and they just choose to say whatever they want with no repercussions. You'll never know who's behind the account. You'll
Yeah.
never find them on the street. You know what I mean? You might bump into them. You're not going to know who sent you that hate message. And so it is hard, especially when you're exposed to the extent that FIA Girly is exposed.
Mm.
And I don't think it's I don't think the attacks come to me personally.
Personally, yeah.
I think it's always to FIA Girly, the
Yeah.
account and the person that's there. I don't think anyone knows me on a level where they can throw something at me and be like, you da, 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 da. But yeah, I think being as exposed as FIA Girly is, it's really hard because one, your opinion is never going to be taken as just an opinion,
No.
or I can disagree
Yeah.
respectfully, but I'll move on with my day. Da, da, da. It's always going to come, either it's an attack or it's something that you chose to fulfill an agenda, whatever it is. And so it's really, really hard sometimes to keep your cool and be like, I don't know these people. Let's just move on. And today I don't even check my mentions anymore. It's really hard for me to actually go in my mentions because of
I
this type
remember
of
that when
stuff.
we're asking you at different things.
Exactly,
I think
yeah.
you're right. Like there's definitely a persona that people do take on, and especially with Formula One, where you have such polarizing opinions, because people have teams that they support, they have drivers that they support, and everybody naturally wants to see their driver on top. They want to see their team on top. So if you're posting something that is against their driver or against their team, it's going to get people's back up. And I think the criticisms that I would have of maybe like F1 Twitter is just that we can't take, well, just like F1 social media, because we say Twitter, but that's just because that's kind of how you and I can communicate the majority of the time. But I think just F1 social media in general, because there is a lot of like vitriol on TikTok, on Instagram. Even like sometimes you even go to the comments of some of the journalist articles, and there's still like stuff in the articles. So I think just any kind of form of social media where you're behind a screen and you can comment on something. And I think we all just need to learn to understand that somebody else's opinion doesn't have to be our opinion, and it doesn't negate our opinion. So if you have an opinion, you can still express that in a respectful way, without having to like shoot other people's opinions down. But kudos to you on kind of like sticking through it, because clearly, despite all of that, you've learned to just ignore your mentions and turn it into a more positive experience, because your account's doing
it's
really
not
well.
easy. It's
It's
not
not
easy.
easy. I can
Sometimes I'm
imagine.
like, oh, I see something, I'm like, I need to reply to this. But I think
That
being a big
happens a lot as
account,
well
yeah,
to us.
something about being a big account that I appreciate isn't just like the numbers, but it also brings me awareness of the amount of people that I have on my account. So in the sense that if I quote or tweet something, or if I reply something, I know there's at least 1,000 people that have my notifications on. Do I want to expose these 1,000 people to whatever I'll be replying to, whether it's me being a nasty person towards whoever is saying something, or if someone said something nasty, do I want them to now go see what it is that they said? And then I know a lot of my followers usually pile on people, like just as a response of like, oh, she's so nice, why are you doing this to her? Do I want them to now go and be this negative
It's good that
person
you
towards
have that
someone else?
accountability. And I
Yeah,
think some of the
so
big accounts do forget that. Like, even though you might not have an agenda, as soon as you interact with that account and you interact with that person, you open that person up to a lot of a lot of interactions, a lot of engagement, and that could be negative or positive depending on the agenda of your followers. So like, it's good that you have that kind of knowledge and awareness. And I'm sure it didn't just come overnight. Like we said, you've been there for a year now, over a year, kind of dealing with all of this. I think one of the interesting things I just kind of want to go back to is you said that when you were learning about all of the Formula One stuff, it was because the conversations you were having were too narrow, and you wanted to kind of expand the horizons of the conversation. And one of the things that I've always thought is that people like you, people like Bryson, people like Brad Philpott, who have so much more knowledge about racing and all of the kind of aspects of aero and tech, probably have a much more fuller experience than some of us, because you get to kind of look at a car driving around a corner and think about the downforce and what tires they've used for their strategy, and so many more things that I probably can't even say. So do you have any tips for anybody who wants to kind of expand their viewing of Formula One and their experience?
so I would say read a lot, Because when I started personally, it was watching a race or watching qualifying or something, then going into straight into what are the pundits saying, what are the people who know saying, right? So it was going into Sky and listening to Ant Davidson. He does such nice reviews and like in the Sky Pad.
Yeah.
So it was going and looking at that. It was going into these. Obviously, today I read more articles than maybe your average F1 fan, but there's such basic sources like Autosport, Motorsport, the race, just to name a few. So I think my biggest advice would be, if you want to know something, go and read, because oftentimes these people are making like straight out reviews of, okay, Hamilton didn't qualify well because his tires were out of the window. Now you're trying to understand, what does this mean? So then you're going to go find out that it means they weren't in the right temperature. Why weren't they in the right temperature? Because the track was cold. So these little things you start picking up. And then the thing about Formula One is it's we're kind of like in the echo chamber, if I can call it that. Things happen over and over and over and over again. It's never like a new thing. And even if it's a new thing, someone must have picked it up some time ago. So you will notice that in the next 5 races, we'll have a tire problem again. And you already remember from the time you read about tire temperature, you already know, oh, right, they're struggling with tires, you know? And so it's just going into wanting to investigate, wanting to know what it is. So my first tip would be just read and be in conversations with people, because that's what I did when I was starting, and I still do actually. Is straight out of a race, it's like, okay, what are people saying? What are the there's post race shows on Sky, there's on F1 TV if anyone has F1 TV still. So those are little things that you start picking up and start learning from, and then you can engage into conversation with people, and then that's when you exchange information, right? So then you come to me like, oh, Deni, I read this, and then I can tell you something else. Oh, right, you read it, but did you also know that da 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 da? And then that exchange kind of like helps you get in the right position, and then it's just uphill from there, because then you just start seeing things and learning things as you go.
So when you're watching a race, do you kind of just like watch the race, or do you have like the onboards? Do you have the telemetry? Like what's your kind of setup when you watch a race?
Right. So when I watch a race, I have obviously Twitter on. I have 3 screens. One is the actual race. Yeah. The actual race, Lewis is on board, and data. And then I have a notepad as well. So every race, since I started watching F1 at like as deep as I'm watching it now, I have it annotated. So I have everything from tire compounds, pit stops, the laps. Sometimes I do comparative charts. So as I'm watching it, I'm comparing how like the times Lewis is doing versus the opponent and gaps and things like that. And if anything important happens, I write it down. So it is a handful job. It's a lot to actually take care of. But yeah, my setup is kind of like that. It's 3 screens, data on board, the race, and then Twitter, obviously, because I have to like update people as it goes, and then my notepad.
Wow, that is almost like a part-time job. And as you probably mentioned, but
That's
like
what
you're a
I call
student
it.
as
That's
well.
literally what I call it.
You're doing
No, that's
this
actually
and
what I call it. When
studying.
people are like, oh, can you do something? And I'm like, oh no, sorry, I have work. I'm like, work? I was like, yeah, for what? Like, it is
You
a
have a
job at
whole
some
other
point.
life.
Yeah, no, because I feel so bad sometimes if I have to miss a session or something, and I'm like, oh guys, I have to miss everyone. I get flow like, no, I depend on your updates. Da, da, da. So I try to like, my life right now is scheduled around the F1 calendar, and I can't book anything in between or schedule anything in between, because I'm like, guys, no, I'm busy, I'm working, and it has to be that way.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, I'm on board with you. I did skip the race yesterday to go to Notting Hill Carnival. If you don't already know, I am from the Caribbean. It is literally in my blood. I have my rum because I couldn't be there today. I have my rum and my apple juice in my bottle right now. So if you see me sipping, that's what I'm sipping. And so for me, I think Carnival trumps Formula One just a tiny, tiny bit because it comes around once a year and it is like literally my heritage. But I did manage to catch up on the race this morning. So for those of you who don't know, this race review is about the Belgian Grand Prix in Spa-Francorchamps. And we are going to talk through the whole race, the highlights, catch you guys up on what the best things are that's been happening. So let's start off with the qualifying on Saturday. So it was like I feel like qualifying was kind of dictated more so by the penalties. So a lot of the drivers after the summer break were taking new engine parts, and that meant that a lot of them ended up with back of the grid penalties. And I think even the pundits were slightly confused about what this would mean for the order on Sunday, because they were all saying that this is a very confusing thing. I think even Karun Chandok was like, why is grid penalties a thing? It shouldn't be. The drivers, did you see that, how he was like, it shouldn't be the drivers that take the penalty, it should be the teams somehow.
I saw, yeah. Karun and his would rather not say anything.
But yeah, so there were group penalties. We had Zhou Guanyu, Mick Schumacher, Esteban Ocon, Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, and Valtteri Bottas, who didn't have a back of the grid penalty. He had a 25 place, I believe, grid penalty, which meant that he would start in front of everybody else who qualified at the back of the grid. So qualifying still determined where they would start, but they would all end up starting at the back of the grid, but in their positions of who was fastest in qualifying. So that meant that we did still kind of get a more or less normal qualifying, because it was kind of like everybody still had to work hard so that they could, because there were so many people that had grid penalties, right? There was still an element of, well, we need to be ahead of, if you're Max Verstappen, you want to be ahead of Leclerc, you know?
Yeah.
Was there anything like really interesting for you that you found during quali?
Honestly, watching F1, it's really interesting to still watch, regardless of how your team is doing. But when you see your team kind of doing bad, you kind of like, oh, I just hope everyone else also does bad. So one thing interesting from quali that I think wowed everyone was just how crazy fast the Red Bull was, and just how slow. Obviously, for me, when I'm measuring how fast the team is, it's always relative to Mercedes, because that's where kind of my benchmark is. And so compared to Mercedes, this was the slowest qualifying we've had so far since Bahrain, and it was like 1.7% off like the deficit, and we were 1.8 seconds from pole. And mind you, Max Verstappen only did one lap and in Q3. So he did one lap. He was like, okay, guys, we're going to save these tires. I'm going to go out. Everyone else went, and no one actually got in closer to, and Sainz with the tow, he was still like 6 tenths slower. So qualifying was basically, I think it's cemented for everyone, like this is Max's race to lose. And I know after that, Mercedes, they usually like read data, and George came out before the race and he was like, yeah, we already know that by lap 7 he's going to be like P3 behind us, so it's going to be a really bad race. And it was exactly that. By lap 7, granted, a lot of stuff happened, Max was already behind everyone else, like, hey guys, no, come here. And so I think Wally, the most interesting thing was we already knew everyone was going to drop, like most people were going to drop like Charles and them. And so we were only worried about like where Sergio was going to be at and Sainz. But then to see the Red Bull be that fast was kind of like, whoa. So we have no chance of even trying, because as soon as Verstappen's up there, he's putting 5-10 seconds in our head so easily. But that was, I think, what stood out about quali.
That was it. I think everybody did expect, myself included, Mercedes to kind of come back and be fighting harder at the second half of the season, even Ferrari to be, a lot closer, because also I am a Mercedes fan, so I too judge everything by Mercedes, but at the same time, Mercedes are developing, but so are Ferrari, so are Red Bull, and clearly the deficit. So however they've developed their car over summer, whatever they've changed, maybe it was the engine, because they did have a whole brand new engine. So, that kind of power, it does help. But at the same time, I think we were all kind of expecting Mercedes to be so much closer. And I think that was a bit of a kick in the teeth for all of the Mercedes fans, because they were talking a lot of rep before, like over summer, and basically saying that, we'll be up there, don't worry, kind of thing.
Hungary also gave us a lot of hope. Hungary was kind of crazy, because Lewis had been on a streak of like, and he was like on a streak of like
three
four
podiums.
podiums.
It
And
did.
so everyone was like, okay, they're back because they solved all their problems, right? No more bouncing, no more porpoising. And now all that means is we can actually start developing a car to get performance.
Yeah.
And so when you come in and you're expecting like a large number of upgrades, which we didn't really get, we only get some small reprofile things. We got a new floor, granted, but then Lewis himself never really used a new floor. But then everyone was like looking at the list of upgrades and I was like, is that it? Like,
Mm.
okay, guys, let's just wait and see how it goes. And then Lewis got the new MG UK, which everyone was expecting. It was like, okay, so at least we have an upgraded engine
Power.
component,
Yeah.
power unit component.
Yeah.
And to go into quali and for that to happen, everyone's like, whoa. We
There
at
was
least
also the
expect
fact there was also the fact that everybody was talking about Ferrari and Red Bull having these illegal flaws, and how once they legalize their flaws, that would also kind of maybe bring them back down because it would take
right.
away some of their aero. But either they didn't have illegal flaws at all and nothing changed, or they're still exploiting some loopholes that we don't know about. So,
Right.
you know, that was also a thing. I think generally, like you said, like we were just kind of disappointed with Mercedes, but Red Bull, on the other hand, are running away with this championship, and Ferrari are letting them bolt.
Yeah.
Let's just say that. So yeah, onto the race yesterday. On lap one, we had Carlos Sainz from Sergio Perez from Alonso, who managed to get up there, and Lewis Hamilton was in fourth. I think a lot of people were a little bit apprehensive about Lewis starting next to Alonso just because they do have a history. And then they did end up colliding and touching, which Lewis did say after the race that looking back at the footage, he understood that it was his fault, and that he had turned into Alonso. So, like, what do you think of that situation and Alonso's response and everything?
So first, I already knew Lewis was going to get a good start. He hasn't put a foot wrong since I think the beginning of the season, at least with his start. So I already knew a P3 was going to be in there. I just didn't expect Alonso to be up there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a great start, and we obviously had a problem with the accident, and it was a bold move. And it's just so happened that he didn't see how much space he had left, Fernando, and then I think fair enough, we can't ask anything else from Fernando in terms of the position that he was in because he was already like almost two wheels out in the grass, and more than that he would have ended up in the wall or something, and we can't just ask him to yield that much space. And so it was definitely on Lewis for that mistake, but the heat of the moment shouldn't allow you to say stupid things when you know what your stats are. Do you know what I mean? And in my head, I'm just kind of like, I would never embarrass myself like that. Like I could say something like curse or something and be like, oh, what an idiot. What is this? Da, da, da. Because I know even Lewis does that.
Mm.
He's said it plenty of times. He's raised his hand, his voice, and scream at things. Da, 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 da. And like he doesn't know where he's going. Every driver does that. But for me to be like, oh, this guy only wins from pole when I probably don't have half the wins that he has is kind of like nonsensical to me.
I feel
And
like he's
I
had that one
love
in
to
his
see
back pocket for a long time, right? Like I feel like
he
he's
was just
been
waiting. He
waiting
was just waiting. I
for
think someone told him.
something. And we know I thought Alonso the biggest troll on the grid. I swear he's just there to cause issues. Like he literally just likes to create create drama. He's
It's
like,
kind of
is
crazy
it
because
me?
also
Am I the drama?
am
Like
I
that
the
is
drama? I don't think I'm the drama. Maybe I am. Yeah, no, that's his
that is
energy. But
Alonso
it's
every
so
week.
this was a salty weekend because someone asked. I saw a video this morning of an interviewer asked Sebastian Vettel like, "Oh, so what do you think about? Are you gonna talk to Fernando about his moving to Aston Martin?" He was like, we're not close. We never were, so I don't know." And I just like Lewis going in and being like, "I don't care what he's saying." It was just like a shady weekend. I was like, "Well, you're getting what you need, what you asked for right now," because
Yeah.
yeah, no there was no need for that comment. It was very stupid. I'm glad Lewis was a bit salty about it. Not salty, but like shady about it.
Mm.
Um, he
His
got what
shrug
he
was
deserved.
everything. He was just like, yeah,
Yeah,
I don't care, walk off. I'm not even dealing with that kind of
yeah. It
nonsense.
was like
And like
F that guy.
still took accountability, even though the steward said that it was just a racing incident. Like he still
Yeah,
took accountability and said like, look, it was my bad. I could have done it differently. So I think overall, like it was just unfortunate for him because it meant that his whole race was ruined. He was out. At the same time, you also had Latifi, who was doing his weird spinning drama and ended up tagging Valtteri Bottas.
He
And
actually spin off. He went off the track. He
yeah,
went wide, so he went on the gravel and then lost the car.
yeah.
And Bottas was a bystander that unfortunately had to like swerve and then got stuck in the gravel.
And it was
It's
his
always
birthday weekend as well, so that was so
oh yeah,
unfortunate for Bottas.
yeah.
I
It was
think
his birthday
generally
on Sunday, was it not?
I think it was his birthday on Sunday. I think it was actually on his
Yeah,
birthday, yeah.
yeah. That
So
was
that
sad.
was just generally an unfortunate thing for him.
Mm.
But yeah, like so that's only the first 2 laps. There's so much more of the race. Charles had a very interesting race. Like he pitted quite early during the safety car for Bottas and Hamilton. So they sent out a safety car to pick up the cars, and Charles ended up pitting and going onto the medium tires from the soft, and then they tried to like extend that stint for a really long time. And there was this one point during the race where his engineers like calling him on the radio and being like, "Oh, which tires do you prefer? Would you like the hard tires or the medium tires?" And I was like, "Is this Starbucks? Why are you asking him what he prefers? Like, give him the tires that he needs."
No, how do you want your chicken?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I think Ferrari's just been on like a road like downhill, and the main problem about them as a team is not even like them making the bad calls. For me, it's not admitting to having a problem. It's asking Charles or putting Charles in the hards and saying, "Oh yeah, it wasn't a problem. We wanted to put him on the hard tires, even though you knew the hard tires weren't working." Or it's pitting Charles last minute when it's nonsensical to put him on the last lap to go for a fast lap when you still need to maybe get
the tires
a
and
lap
get
on
them
to
up.
warm up the tire or something like
Yeah.
that, and saying, "Oh no, you need to be brave on F1. Sometimes you need to just take a step back and be like, hey guys, this stuff isn't working, right?" And also the fact that from the get-go, they're on the radio talking to Charles and saying, "Oh, so we predict the P5." Like, what? This guy is in the championship. He's fighting for a championship right now,
Yeah.
and you're predicting a P5. What
Yep.
is wrong with that? And so I think the lack of accountability and the lack of awareness of Ferrari is what's going to cost them this championship more than anything else.
Charles has the capability, but for some reason, like he makes small mistakes. And I've said from earlier in the year that I think those kind of little mistakes are what he needs to iron out in order to like really be serious about contending for a championship. But in saying that, I don't think he's made like yesterday's race, he didn't make a mistake. That was all on Ferrari. Like you said, they pitted him at an awful time towards the end of the race. And
Yeah.
just in general, like the deficit that they have to Red Bull, people keep calling Charles a championship contender. To me, Max is already running away with this championship. Like I don't see Ferrari as in contention. I think that there's more of a contention around like second and third place in the championship. Like if you're going to talk about battles and contending for anything, there's no contention for first at the moment. Like nobody is holding a light to Red Bull and Max Verstappen.
Yeah. But also like his race was just unfortunate. Like the first lap, he got the tear up from Max helmet, got stuck in there. It was so bad that it kind of burnt one of his sensors. So then at the end, you just see how it just is like dominoes because it burned the sensor in there, and then at the end they couldn't see the speed in the pit lane because the sensor was gone and all of that. And so he did have an unfortunate race, but I think they could have maximized a lot with that. Especially after that first pit stop, they would have said like, "Okay, guys, we lost some time here. We need to run long. We need to do something about this," and then just try and get him to maximize his race as much as possible. But then also we need to take into account they just didn't have the pace. And that's something that people should be talking about more. Was it the new TD that came in? Because now you don't have the aid of your flexi floor anymore, because I know a lot of people were focusing on Red Bull, but then we're forgetting that Mattia also came out and said, "Hey, we might need to change our floors to meet with this new technical directive." And maybe that happened, but then also some stuff came out that they had to raise their floors, the right height, and all of that. And so we need to say performance just wasn't there for Ferrari, and it was unlucky for Charles because Sainz was able to maximize a P3, was it? A P3.
Yeah, I think in the end, yeah.
Yeah. And so where is Charles? And when you need him to be there, why isn't he there? And is that a driver thing or is it a team thing? And I think that's where you need to start on
I think it's
layering
interesting with Sainz because he has done quite well. I don't have my trackpad of everybody's results, finishing results, but he has been doing quite well. And I've always been a kind of champion for Sainz just because I felt like when he was coming into Ferrari last season, everybody put their money on Charles, knowing the caliber of driver that Charles was, but no, everybody kind of underestimated Sainz, despite him having a really good career so far, like in Toro Rosso, McLaren, like he had a decent career and stuff. So yeah. I think people underestimate Sainz as a driver. And again, like yesterday, he did fairly well. But I still do think that Ferrari needed to champion one of them, not necessarily Charles over Sainz, probably Charles, just because he has a little bit more tenacity with his driving style. But they didn't. And I think that was back in like, I want to say before France, maybe even like as far back as like Monaco kind of thing. And I feel like when they chose to kind of let them race and do that thing where they let both drivers kind of compete, they shot themselves in the foot because Charles could have been much further, closer and actually competing. And then one race where you're a bit slower because maybe you've changed the floor or your strategy doesn't go so well, it's not going to cost you so much. But it's costing them a lot, and it's costing Charles a lot. He's not a contender for this championship.
Yeah, no, I think I think Ferrari kind of favored a driver. I think coming into the season, I was kind of like, I know myself and a few people went with this narrative that there is no number one driver at Ferrari, and whoever's going to be at the front is who they're going to back. But it turns out Charles is at the front, and Charles is who they want to back, regardless of Sainz winning or not. And I think we've seen that, and people might come for people. We have seen that in previous races.
Crazy because they do want to back Charles. Sorry, they do want to back Charles, but they don't. Like it's like they still cause him problems.
I think they're an incompetent team. I think they want to back Charles. Charles is their number one driver. It's clear for everyone. It's just that they don't know what to do. They've never been, I mean, they have, but it's been years since they've been at the front and a strategy that's leading and winning and a driver that's not making the smallest mistakes and hitting the wall and stuff like that. So I think they need a self-awareness, they need accountability, but at the same time, Charles isn't really helping himself in certain occasions, is he?
I hope by next season, because I'm not holding out any hope for this season, but I hope by next season he irons out the kinks.
I feel like we need to cut Charles some slack. It's still his first season. He still doesn't know what the pressure is like. His team hasn't won a championship in a couple years. I think one was the last one. I don't even remember myself. But I think it's really important to also let the champion brew, if that makes sense. I think if he does have the car next year, he's still gonna come back. If he had won it, great. It would have been like, whoa, you're straight out, you're ready to go, you're ready to go battle bigger dogs like Hamilton and stuff like that. But it's just so happened that he's having a bad season where he's pushing the car to the limit and then the oversteer is killing him. He's up in the wall, and obviously reliability as well, because Ferrari haven't been the biggest fans of building an ICE engine. And so I think for a first time, his mistakes make sense for Ferrari as a team, not personally, because we do see Carlos listening to them and being like, no, I'm not going to do that because that's horrendous. Like, stop inventing guys, like he says. And so there's certain things where we can say, okay, this is a team mess up and this is a problem the team needs to take into account. But then small mistakes like Charles absolutely pushing it to the limit, I think pundits and maybe people on social media have been too harsh on him. These things happen, and at some point he's going to understand, like, okay, I'm fighting for a championship. Maybe next year he's going to be
Maybe
back
I
up
need
there
to rein it in a
and say,
little.
yeah, now I understand a bit better the car, and I'm not going to do what I did last year. Also, these are new
they'll
cars.
be building, these are new cars, so they'll be building on this car for the next few seasons.
Yeah.
And I think also, like, people underestimate the fact that Max has been in the, like, he's been in Formula One for, I want to say 7 years. It could be 8 years. I can't remember. I know he was 17. I think he's 25 in September coming up. So that's like literally going to be 8 years. And you know that he's born in September because I'm also born in September, and it really like
not because you're keeping tabs. But then also Max just learned from the best. Like the first time he's fighting for a championship, he's next to Lewis. You do end up picking up certain things from that, you know?
He's battled, and even like if you go back to his rookie season, his earlier seasons, you know, he was making a lot of mistakes. But I think as well, he's a sophomore. So you've got like the kind of the juniors, and you know, even the ones who've been in Formula One for a long time. I think the sophomores are like Carlos Sainz, Verstappen, you know, not Ocon, but maybe Ocon, because Ocon's also been in there for quite a while.
Sophomores like A levels. I don't know, like Americans.
Sophomores, I'm saying, is like, so you've got like juniors, seniors, and sophomores. Like the seniors are Alonso, Vettel, Ricardo.
Right. So is sophomores the first ones, and then juniors, and then seniors, or is it juniors, sophomores, and then seniors?
Junior, sophomore, senior.
Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
So there's like the mid. They're like the mid-level, right? And I think Verstappen's kind of actually been there for a long time. As much as he is a junior in the sense of the age range, and you know, he competed with Leclerc and all that kind of stuff, but actually in Formula One terms, he's been in the sport. He's got that experience, right? So it makes sense that he is kind of capitalizing on all of that experience and literally just breezing through. But elsewhere on the grid, we did have Russell, who had quite an amazing race. I think we all focused a lot on how everything that happened with Lewis, but there was one point where Russell was running in second. And yes, he had to pit again, but he was running in second.
Yeah. No, I think when the whole thing with Lewis happened, I was like, I'm dead, and my morale's killed, and my followers were like, Deni, we still have Russell, we still have to cheer for Russell, and I was like, okay, I still have to update, like, even though I want to like shut my computer, and I still have to update people, and so I was like, okay, let's look at what Russell's doing, and then I loaded data because obviously I learned how to code, because we didn't talk about this, but I also learned how to code because of F1. So I look at data. We're gonna
get you back on, and basically we're gonna talk tech. Like that is my new mission with you. We're getting you back on, and Mariam's back, and we are talking tech. You are teaching us how to like read data and do telemetry and code and all this kind of stuff. I'm ready for it. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
So at some point, I'm like looking at data as the race is going. I'm like, what is going on? Because you can see, obviously your pace isn't determined by just one lap. So I saw one lap where George was like, I even did the maths because I'm not too good at math. So I did the maths in my calculator. I was like, that is 1.4 seconds faster. But it was just one lap. I was like, calm down, it's okay. But then it was just recurrently the same lap times over and over. And George was actually faster by on average in the medium tire by 3/10 faster than Sainz, and then on the hard tire 4/10 faster. Wow. And is that Mercedes' true pace? Maybe it is, right? And maybe right now our direct rival is Ferrari. George Russell had an amazing race, and I think we need to talk about it more, especially as Mercedes fans. Maybe not so much the Hamilton ones, but then we need to not be hindered by what happened in qualifying, because that was converted into amazing race pace. Also, like, track was hotter, and tires were working properly. They could push more, and they were running longer. George, I think, had a longer strategy than Sainz did. Because he didn't have the softs, so he could run a bit longer with his first pair of mediums, and then obviously he had to switch to hards because you need to do 2 tire compounds. But his race was phenomenal. It just so happened that he made a mistake in the last 2 laps, but he was closing on signs. And I remember one time I was giving up lap time. Someone was asking me, like, is he catching up? And like I just could see the gap going lower and lower, like 10th by 10th every lap. And I was like, he actually is closing, and we could actually get a podium right here. And so George had a phenomenal race. I think he did really, really well, and he deserves his flowers.
And we've got 3 back-to-back races. You know, we've got 3 weekends of racing. So, you know, that's a lot of they can capitalize on any kind of race pace that they've gained this week, and they're not necessarily going to lose it over a weekend.
So and also George doing well. If like if a driver of George's caliber is doing well and competing with Ferraris, he did pass Charles on merit, mind you. He did make the pass, like, you know, I mean, so if a driver like George is doing what he's doing on track and passing Ferraris and winning, what can a driver like Lewis do? And I think this is what should leave us hopeful. It's kind of like, if this is our pace and this is Ferrari's pace, this weekend, when Lewis is on track, we might see a masterclass. We might see him in the podium, P2 maybe, because then all he has to do is fight Perez.
Yeah, I literally just wanted to get one win. I know that's crazy to say, but at least one win this season, and I'll be really happy.
We might get it. I'm still very hopeful. We still have like 8 races to go, so
I'm super hopeful. Perez, who is one of my babies, so I don't know if you know this, but I'm a massive Checo fan. I know a lot of people. Yeah, I'm a massive Checo fan. I've been a massive Checo fan since Force India days. Checo.
How are you handling all of this? With him being off the pace and testing things and given like,
I basically there is a clip from me from Hungary basically saying that they use Checo for spare parts for Max. It's like when you grow a second baby and you just want the baby to take the pieces for Max, and that's basically what they use Checo for. And that's very upsetting.
Clothes that don't fit. The clothes that don't fit, like, just give them to your brother. That's what they do.
But we've had a lot of conversations about this, and I think, you know, he's not a brand new driver. He's not a rookie. He knows what contract he signed up for. He gets to race with the best car on the grid. It's not like he's racing the bucket, you know? So I think in that sense, you know, he's happy, and I just have to be happy for him. But also, he made a big mistake this race. So when he does make mistakes, I'm gonna call him out, which is like when he was overtaking.
What mistake did he make?
When he was overtaking Leclerc, he literally left Leclerc like no space, and then that was like messed up. So I think sometimes he's taken the leaf out of like the old Max Verstappen book, and he literally squeezed Leclerc off the side of the track. And I was just like, yo, dude, come on, like drive better than that.
Right. But he's been doing that actually.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I feel like he got into Red Bull, and then they were just like, yeah, that's how we do it around here. Like, you can do that if you want. It's okay.
Yeah.
So that was not great. But Max, on the other hand, did have an amazing race. He started in P13 because both AlphaTauris took not just the grid penalties, they ended up starting from the pit lane. Because they changed them.
The AlphaTauris have grid penalties.
No, they didn't have grid penalties. They started from pit lane because of
Yuki started the pit lane because Yuki, and then
Pierre had it.
Pierre's car just had technical fault. Like it wasn't starting, so they just pushed it back to the garage to So there was some issues with AlphaTauris. Another reason why, like, we'll talk about this later, but why I want to see Pierre out of there, man. And literally Max then, you know, already started from P13 essentially, and we knew that he was going to have a good race. He has a literal rocket ship under his arse, and he is managing it very well. Like, he's not letting it overpower him. He's driving really well, and he ended up kind of breezing through the cars. Like, he had no resistance. There was no trouble. There was a point where he was overtaking, trying to think who it was. I feel like it was Alonso or maybe like Ocon. I feel like it was Alpine. And he literally was overtaking them, and it just looked like he was just slicing through. See, when you like heat up a knife and you like put it through butter, he was just like, and it was crazy because I remember one of the times I was like just scrolling through Twitter because I was just kind of like, I don't know, the race at some point just got a bit boring for me. But I was scrolling through Twitter, and then this Ferrari account was like, oh, Max's last lap was 1.4 seconds faster than, I don't know if it was either Charles or Sainz. And I was like, bro, what? What do you mean? This is your direct championship rival. What do you mean 1.4 seconds? And then if you're 1.4 seconds, that means there's no grasping you here. You're just in another planet, in a league of your own. You're doing your own thing. The battle was between second, third, and fourth. And granted, Checo had a really. I thought actually after the race, I wanted to look at data because I thought Max was the only driver who had average 152s, but actually Checo had really nice pace and he averaged 152.8. And
so that means
so
both Red Bulls are operating with similar
when yeah
with similar
right parts. Exactly. No, but that's actually really interesting because there's usually a big discrepancy between the two Red Bulls, and this has been there for the past few races. And this is why, because when I look at data, I'm like, I want to see how far off the cars, the teammates are from each other as well, not just between teams. And so I was like, oh well, Max is probably the only one who did a 152 because he averaged a 152.3. And so when I load Checo's average, it was actually 152.8, and I was like, well, he was actually within that window of what a Red Bull driver should be doing because no one else went a 152. Because from Russell to Charles, it was 153. And so that was actually very good of him. I was like, okay, kudos to you. Now you're running a car that we can say maybe it's just now difference in driver ability, perhaps. Yeah, and like the skill that Max is able to do and stuff like that.
So to me, that shows also that both Red Bulls just have this amazing car. You know how like for years and years people are like, you know, Lewis only wins because of the car. If it was the driver, the difference would be a lot larger, right? Like the difference between the average times, you would see a lot larger difference, right? So to me, also the car,
you'd get at least a second. Because I've seen places where they're at least a second apart, and I'm like, do you really think they're driving the same car? They're not.
I mean, you just have to look like Latifi and Albon. Like Albon is doing bits with that Williams, and Latifi cannot do it. Like he literally just can't. He doesn't know how to drive. He should not be on that grid.
Yeah.
So you know, it's just you can see massive differences, and I think it's a testament to Red Bull and how great of a car that they've built this year, and you know the fact that they both do have probably a similar car at this point in the year. They definitely did not at the beginning of the year, but they do now.
No. I mean, we'll see in other races, but for this first one at least, they did have Checo did have a car where Sainz couldn't get close to. At least we can see that. Because normally he's in the mix. Normally he's there fighting Lewis or Sainz or Charles or someone's there, and we're like, oh, Checo's such a bad driver. It's normally like the car, if we can say that. And I think the car thing is just a cop out to discredit Hamilton and his achievements and stuff like that. No one drives a bad car and puts it up there. Vettel's one of the most skilled drivers I personally know. Alonso is one of the most skilled drivers that many people know and respect, and he's a 2-time world champion. Sebastian Vettel's 4-time world champion. They're not putting in the podium, they're not putting in the points because they don't have the car, right? So it is a machinery mix-up that you kind of need. You need a good car, but you also need to know how to drive it. Charles has a good car, phenomenal car. What is he doing? Even when he's at the front, then there's a load of oversteer and he's in the wall. You need to know how to catch your car. You need to know how to put your car through the corners at maximum speed, maximizing your lap times and still getting it to the finish line, right? You need to know how to just basic things, how to steer properly, how to perfect your lap. And you need to make sure that you are getting your car in that finish line. And not everyone knows how to do that. And unfortunately, there is no autopilot, right? And so you still need a driver. And it's the car discourse. You won't see it with Max, guaranteed you won't see it because it's only
because then if the people who were saying that before, if they say that it's the car for Max, then all of their arguments for Lewis go out of the window. So
they validate that Lewis actually won all his championships. And I honestly, it doesn't go through my head how you can disrespect someone that has literally the most amazing numbers in history. You've never seen 100 wins ever. You've never seen 103 poles ever.
I always say, regardless of what Lewis does from now, he's already a GOAT and he's already a legend and he will always be a legend. So even if he never wins another race in his career, touch all kinds of wood, because that is not going to happen. But like, you know, he's already a GOAT. Yeah, other good things that happened on the grid before we do our winners and losers of the day. Ocon did a really, really great overtake. It was Alonso.
It wasn't
No,
just
sorry,
one; it was twice.
yeah,
right?
there was the one where like Vettel and Gasly were like fighting, and then Ocon was just like, "Cool, thanks, I'll take that." I love
Yeah,
when people,
no,
when the
but what
drivers say that.
people aren't seeing is he did that twice.
Yeah,
He did a double overtake twice. The first one was with Ricciardo and Latifi or Album, one of the Williams, right? And then the second one was with the AlphaTauri and Vettel, was it?
yeah.
And so I was like, guys, listen, this is the driver you guys are sleeping on because that is
Yeah.
my driver. And I'm like, you need to rep Ocon right now because his stocks are gonna go up. And there's a reason why Alpine signed this man for I don't know however long until like 2024 or something like that because
Yeah,
there
they've
is
all got really
talent.
long contracts now, don't they?
Yeah, he does, and they want him to build. And so he did that double overtake. First one was lap 15 or 17, and then the other one was like lap 35. And so I think people are just seeing the two and thinking it's the same one, but he actually did it twice, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is a Mika move," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's my driver."
Ocon's
And he
bossing
ended
it.
up in like
He definitely was bossing
P7.
it yesterday.
He's the
He
better
did so good.
French.
He's the better French. Well, okay, so in that kind of news, let's touch on the French. So where we left off at the end of last season, you had Vettel retiring. Mariam was very upset. She was, you know, heartbroken. I had to console her. Vettel was retiring, and then Alonso jumped into Vettel's seat, which left his seat open at Alpine. Alpine decided that they were going to use their reserve driver, Oscar Piastri. Oscar Piastri said, "Babes, I'm not available." And then everybody now has gone into this crazy contractual discussions. In the midst of all of that, Oscar Piastri was alluded to have been going to McLaren, and McLaren made the decision to let go of Daniel Ricciardo. That happened over the summer break. We have not discussed that on this show. So if you have any words about that, how do you feel?
First, I think Oscar should have been a bit more careful in what he says and how he puts out his statements, just because Otmar, I watched the press conference. Otmar seems and sounds very confident in the binding contract that they have and the terms of that contract. And I don't think a team is as irresponsible to the point where they would say something that isn't there. And I think he should have been more careful when putting out something like, oh, especially because he's not an F1 and no one really rates him as an F1. Obviously, a lot of people want him in the sport, but he's still not there. He doesn't have a name for himself yet. And it's very easy for you to lose that one spot you're going to be granted. And so I think he should have been a bit more careful. But then we're also going to find out because they are in their hearing. It's probably over by now, but obviously they're going to deliberate and decide on that. I will have to see. Obviously, we'll
I'm
have
just
to
checking Twitter right now just to see if there's any news.
Oh, right. I don't think so. I think they're still gonna wait for a bit and deliberate because it's kind of like a court hearing, so you kind of need to look at the facts and the contracts. But then you have Daniel Ricciardo, which there's two sides of the coin for me. One is this amazing driver, super talented, where I think I can agree with Sebastian Vettel when he said maybe McLaren has failed to extract his potential, because we've seen him at Red Bull, we've seen him win races, we've seen him lead strategies and stuff like that. But then at the same time, what do you do to extract a driver's potential that is simply not getting used to the car and the concept of the car? And the thing about Red Bull drivers coming out is they get so used to an aggressive car that is doing what they wanted to do, and then they go to a car who's like, I am the leader here, I am dictating the rules, you need to adapt to me. And that is what they're not able to do, right? They're not the transition. And if you look at Vettel, for instance, coming out of Red Bull to Ferrari, not being able, how many times did he spin in that Ferrari because he's not able to have the same response he had in the Red Bull in the newer car. And so that also happened with Ricciardo, and we need to ask the question, how long does McLaren need to give Daniel? And granted, there's so many nuances to his races where, oh my gosh, you can say they sabotaged him, they didn't let him overtake, they didn't give him a good strategy, blah, 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 problems with the car and all of that. But then we also need to look at the driver, we also need to look at the performance, and we need to look at what the contract said. We were expecting performance from Daniel, we didn't get performance, now we're dropping him. Does that mean he's a shit driver? Obviously not, but F1 is a cutthroat sport. F1 is a sport where people want results and people want someone at the top. And if it doesn't happen, you get dropped. And we have that Red Bull as an example where they dropped like 3 drivers in a row or something like that because they wanted someone to be at the front. And it's someone on Twitter said, F1 literally named the Netflix series Drive to Survive because you are driving to survive. You literally need to be there. You need
very true. And I think this season has given them even more Daniel Ricciardo content for them to milk and turn into a beloved saga for him. I personally, I agree with McLaren's reasoning. I said, we did a video earlier in the year, where will Pierre Gasly be in 2023? And basically the whole thing about the video was like, if Pierre Gasly was to have left AlphaTauri this year, which team would he have ended up in? And I personally put money on McLaren because I just know the way McLaren operate. I know that they are as cutthroat, if not even more cutthroat than Red Bull. See what they did to like Magnussen, Perez, Van Dorn. Like they literally don't, Kovalainen, they don't give two fucks, like if you're not driving well. And when I say well, that doesn't mean that because you're not a good driver, you're not driving well. That just means like if you're not performing in their car, they don't care. So
exactly,
I had a feeling that they were going to do that, and I knew that they would end the contract with, despite them continuously saying that Ricciardo was like guaranteed until the end of 2023 into 2020. Into 2023.
23.
I think I just knew how they were. The only thing I got wrong was I thought that they would do it for Pierre because I thought that he would be looking to get out of his AlphaTauri contract and go into
a might still be.
He might. And this is the Oscar Piastri issue, because if Oscar Piastri ends up at Alpine, well, if he ends up at Alpine because he has to go to Alpine because of the contract award. But then at the same time, like even if you're Alpine, would you want him?
Exactly.
That's what if you've got a driver that's like, I don't want to drive for you, regardless of what the contract says, would you not
just get your money and go?
Yeah,
you're gonna get the money and go. You're gonna be like, okay, we don't want him anymore. We won the case in the hearing. We won our indemnization, whatever the hell you want to talk about remedies, and then you move on to the next big thing. And I'm pretty sure Gasly might have just a little bit more talent than Oscar. I don't want to speak a lot on Oscar and himself as a driver because I don't watch the other support series. I don't watch F2, F3 and all of that stuff. I just focus on F1. So I don't know what type of driver he is, the caliber and stuff like that. But if a Gasly is answering your call,
because I think Gasly is a known entity in Formula One. Like you've seen his driving. Yes, this year AlphaTauri are having an absolutely awful year between him and Tsunoda.
But you can't say it's the driver.
Like that, exactly. That was definitely the car. Yeah. So I mean, I think if any team, either McLaren or Alpine, can get Gasly out of that AlphaTauri contract, and I'm not sure how ironclad that is, whether or not he has to stay in that now. I just felt like he signed it way too early. He shouldn't have signed it that early, but whatever. Because I knew that he should have waited until after silly season, because I knew this thing was going to happen in some way, shape, or form. It's going to be interesting. Only thing I wanted to kind of touch on was there was a comment made by Lando Norris earlier in the week, which was basically that he did not feel any. He was asked if he feels sympathy for Ricciardo and everything that he's gone through this year, leading to him exiting the team. And his response was that he doesn't feel any sympathy. He also did say that he wishes him really well and like they've learned a lot from each other, and he had very nice things to say to him. But a lot of people like jumped on him for basically saying that he has no sympathy. And I agree, because I think that as a driver, that's your teammate. And regardless of the fact that you're competing against each other, it costs nothing to empathize. And I think for someone who is such a proponent of mental health. Like, just to say that you have sympathy for someone doesn't take anything away from you. So for me, I just think that he could have worded his answer better, especially since he was saying on the other hand that, you know, they've learned a lot from each other and that they've had a good year together. So for me, there's no reason, there wasn't animosity. It's not like a Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton situation where, of course, they're not going to be like, well, I sympathize for that guy. Like, they're competing, but they're not competing for a championship. They're not like against each other in such a way that's causing turmoil. So I don't think it would have cost Lando Norris anything. And I think he needs to kind of understand that he doesn't always need to be this nonchalant character who says everything in a sarcastic way and brushes everybody else's feelings off, because to me, that is that complete juxtaposition to him saying that he advocates for mental health and he advocates for all of these things. So that's just a personal note on what he said.
No, I wouldn't disagree. I think there's also like a time and place for when you say certain things. This sympathy comment isn't the first time Lando has said something like that about Daniel. I know last year when he was struggling and stuff like that, they asked him, "Oh, do you have sympathy for Daniel?" And he was like, "No, I have. Why should I have sympathy for him?" And I think last year was more justified because it was more about, do you have sympathy for him underperforming? And he's like, no. And fair enough, why should you have sympathy for someone that you're trying to beat, right? But then in this case, it's more of like, do you have sympathy for the situation he's in right now and the fact that he's being dropped? And it's, even though it's a mutual agreement, we all know Daniel would have continued at McLaren if they had, you know, if they had said, let's continue. It's more of a McLaren wanting to drop Daniel than them both sitting down and saying, hey, it's not working, right? And so it's more of like, as a human being, do you have sympathy for another human being? That's kind of like how the question was phrased.
Yeah.
And it kind of sounded like a dick move coming out and saying, of course not. Like, why should I even be bothered about his driving and his contracts and stuff like that? And I think if you built a friendship with someone for 2 years and you're learning things from each other and spending time, at some point you do feel that human side where you're like, I feel bad because he deserves some more time. I feel bad because maybe now we don't know what his future is, and he's such a great driver and such a good friend. Da, 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 da. And that just comes to show the type of guy Lando is. And granted, he didn't have to say, he has a big platform and didn't have to say that. But I think when people say things, it's very important to take it as they are.
Exactly.
And Lando basically showed the type of person that he is. And maybe we should take it like that. He doesn't care. And point blank, that is exactly what he's trying to show us. And instead of trying to beat around the bush and be like, oh, he could have, he should have, he didn't. No, he doesn't care about this teammate. Maybe if it was Carlos, he would have felt some different way because that's his actual friend, and he doesn't care about Daniel just as much. I personally didn't agree with the comment, but I'll take it at face value. He meant it. He said it, what he said. It's not the first time he said it twice. So it's unfortunate, but
I totally agree with you.
It's Lando.
So the last thing that we normally do on our videos is we do our winner and loser of the weekend. So for you, who was your loser of the weekend?
Loser. I want to say Charles. Okay. Charles is my loser of the weekend, just because he should have been up there. The same way Verstappen was slicing through at least fifth by the 10th lap or something. Granted, they have different cars. Granted, he had to pit earlier and had all those issues with the front right tire. And so for me, he's the biggest loser. Also, he can be assertive with his decisions. He didn't want to pit at the end. He was like, oh, I don't want to, but if you guys want to, we could do it. And then the team's like, okay, we'll make the decision for you, you know? He could have just been like, guys, I don't think we should risk it. Let's not do it. And I'm going to continue my race.
That's the difference between, I think, him and Carlos, right? Like, Carlos is a lot more, he can think laterally whilst he's driving. And he can be like, if we pit right now, this is what's going to happen.
Exactly. And he goes, no, let's not do it. Let me keep going. I think he could have been more assertive, and we should have seen Max 1, Charles 2, or Charles 1, Max 2. Maybe not so much a Ferrari win, but we should have seen Charles in the podium, and not seeing him there, for me, makes him a loser.
Okay.
Who's your
My loser of the day, for the first time in 18 months of having this podcast YouTube channel, is going to be Lewis Hamilton.
Right.
I've never given him my loser of the day, and it burns my heart. But the fact that he was not in that race for me, and caused by a driver error on his part, that for me makes him my loser of the day, because he really should have been in that race and he should have been up there. Like you said, like there was a lot of potential to extract from the Mercedes despite the bad qualifying, and I think we could have been looking at potentially another podium, or at least like 4th and 5th place for both Mercedes. So that 100%. Was crucial points lost, I feel like. And then your winner of the day.
My winner of the day is Esteban Ocon. There's no other way. There's no way I'm going to go elsewhere. I think P17, was it? P17 to P7 is an astonishing performance. He deserves his flowers. And not only just because sometimes you can win places by just going up as people pit, and some people just fall behind and stuff like that. You fall into places and then you just stick there and you defend for your life. He actually raced his way up there. He did 2 double overtakes twice, not once, twice. And so also in a car that not a lot of people put as contention for anything. And when people talk about the Alpine, they only focus on Alonso. It's oftentimes like, oh, Alonso this, da, 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 he's beating his teammate, da, 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 da. And so to see him actually perform and show the type of driver that he is, I saw a lot of tweets that made me really happy about people like, oh, Ocon's so underrated. I'm like, yes, he is, because he's really great.
I'm glad you guys know.
Exactly. And to see him put out the skill out there was really, 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 really nice for me. He really drove an entertaining race, a fun race. And so he gets winner for me.
Cool. I also, we tried to do different drivers, but mine was also going to be Ocon. So we're just going to do the same driver today. And I think Esteban Ocon, like you said, he performed really well. And I love to see him performing and excelling. And I hope that it continues. So basically echoing everything you said. I'm not going to repeat everything you said, but just echoing that.
I got you.
So thank you so much for coming today. Can you tell everybody, should have done this at the beginning of the video, but can you tell everybody where to find you for those of our followers who don't already follow you?
Yes, guys, I am Deni. I'm well known as FIA Girly, and you can follow me on Twitter, FIA Girly with a Y. And that's just where I'm at. That's my platform and where everyone finds me.
Definitely. And we're going to get you back. We need to sort out that tech video. I think it's going to be amazing, and it will just enrich everybody's experience so much for watching Formula One. And it's nice to do get another girl onto the podcast. I think there are a lot of men in the F1 space. So, you know, me and Mariam and seeing other women, it makes me super happy that you're around. In the meantime, please follow us on all of our socials. It is on the Chicane on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, where we are mainly based with these videos. Please click the link, follow and subscribe, and we will not be back next week. We are taking a week off, or we might do a video. I haven't quite decided, but I am on the road on my way to Monza. So yeah, I can't wait.
That's so nice.
I will be driving through Italy next week Sunday, and there's a good chance that I'm not going to get a chance to watch the race.
Are you driving there?
Yeah, we're driving. Well, we fly to Italy and then we drive when we get there. So it's going to be really on Sunday. There's a whole heap of stuff happening Monday and Tuesday. So chances are I'm not going to get a chance to watch the race. Mariam, as we've said, is on her honeymoon. And the next time you'll see me will be, I'll be at Monza. So follow us for content, and we will be posting a vlog afterwards.
Hey.
Great. Bye, guys. Thanks.